Our guest today is Curt Cronin. I am going to give a very brief introduction and then I'm going to ask Curt to elaborate because I don't think I could bring in all of the detail. Curt is a former Navy SEAL. He is a dad, a husband, and works to help companies, from what I see, live their purpose. People and companies live their purpose. Am I correct, Curt?
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. Now, I have given in 5 seconds what I know is years and years and years of work. Give us a bit of context.
I thought that was a fantastic summary. In the end, I joined the Navy SEALs in 1998 when I graduated from the Naval Academy. I had gone through 3 years of training and was under a ship on September 10th of 2001. And when I came up at 5 a.m. on the West Coast that time, about the same time that the plane started to hit the towers for September 11th, phone started to ring and I never dove again. So the rest of my career was in the desert. So that was a moment like I see many entrepreneurs and business people face, is the world changed in a second, right? And so, and my passion for helping companies find their purpose is that we were candidly too slow for the first 3 years. Right. And it wasn't until we weren't winning that we were forced to evolve, we were forced to adapt. And so my mission is, how do we help get to that proactive side of action where we can take action before the crisis, or a business person can take action before the crisis, because that's really the place where you can have the greatest opportunity for exponential success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you have mentioned that. Why do you think it is, before we delve into being proactive, why do you think it is that so many entrepreneurs fail? I mean, apart from the fact that it's a tough path, right?
Well, it depends on your definition of failure. And so when Navy SEALs say we have a no-fail mission, that doesn't mean everything always goes right. I think that's the perfection mindset, which can be devastating, which is the assumption is, oh, if I watched whatever company that I picked, whatever unicorn that's out there, oh, they must have had a good, great, and then awesome team, right? And so I think it's our perception that most entrepreneurs, if they fail, it's because they quit too soon. And I think a logical solution is the one that, whereas I can't see the outcome, and so I stop. Everything I've ever experienced in the SEALs as an entrepreneur or in life is that you have to continue far beyond the place where you thought that you couldn't see the path, and continue until you can find, I've always found there's a little part that I can do, but it's required, and there's the rest of it that if I keep doing what's mine to do, it will unfold. And that is the most difficult part of the entrepreneurial process, is anything that you do that's going to be extraordinary is going to have to be beyond what you can do. It's going to be, there's the small part that I do, the huge part that unfolds as I go. The right team member shows up, I find the right customer, I find whatever situation, but the only way I get the opportunity to do that is continue in what I call that space for grace, beyond that which I had a plan for.
I love that. It sounds to me like what you are partly talking about is resilience, partly. Can you build that? Do we come with that? How do we, ordinary people out there would look at you and go, okay, but you're a Navy SEAL. Obviously you have that. I don't have that.
And I think that assumption is one of the things that would prevent someone from continuing on. Resilience, I think, is a great description of kind of the reactive side. Resilience is, I continue to pursue beyond any and all situations. The proactive side of that's purpose, right? If it's something that's that important to me, I'll be pulled by purpose. And so that's why I believe you have to have a meaning that's beyond making money, or meaning beyond a transactional value, and it has to be a purpose-based endeavor, because that's what's going to give me the energy to go beyond. The thing that gave Navy SEALs the ability to do superhuman things with very average humans was our commitment to each other, right? The mission was, I'm not going to, the moment I give you that head nod, those rotors spin up on the helicopter, and you've got that little ring of lightning and static electricity that hits the outside of the rotors. And as I look across the helicopter and pick up my night vision and give that head nod, that means my life and yours and mine. And the reason SEALs could do superhuman things with ordinary humans, because with that level of commitment, each person can show up fully. And team, my favorite moniker from the SEALs is team guy. The superpower of each person becomes the strength of the team, and it compensates for each of our weaknesses. We can only show up fully as individuals if we know someone's going to cover our backside. I love the Spartans, right? The Spartans were largely protected because they would strike with one arm and they were protected in the shield by their companion. And so I guess two parts of that answer. One, following a purpose that's larger than yourself, which allows me to continue far beyond any time I would personally quit. And then the second is trust and reliance on the team in that collective purpose.
And I'm going to be controversial, not for the sake of being controversial, but I'm sure it's a question on many people's minds is, can you be that in the world of work today? And if I have never had experience of that as an entrepreneur, I mean, I have shareholders asking me for, what's my next quarter's growth forecast? How do I put that thinking with I need to reach these numbers thinking?
One, you can and you must. I believe it's the only path to do anything extraordinary. I've never seen anyone do something far beyond an individual capability without almost a calling, right? With almost a pursuit of purpose that's and I stayed in the military probably too long because people told me you'll never find people as purpose-based or as driven outside the military. And I found that to be absolutely untrue. Anyone that's building the company, that's what I love about entrepreneurs, are saying, okay, here's the pattern recognition. Here's everything that the world has built to date. And now building on the shoulders of giants, here's what's mine to do. And so to me, the entrepreneurial venture is, have I picked something that's mine to do? Have I picked something that's, what am I going to contribute to society and to the world? And that, if it's truly theirs, is so extraordinary that they're going to, I love Richard Branson's, find a vision that's so compelling that you can rally others to it, find the greatest people in the world, and then 3, resource them so that they can execute. And so I believe it's absolutely required.
So when you go and work with teams, and I mean, we are super privileged to have you on the show because I have seen you in photos with former President Bush. I've seen you in photos with Tim Robbins, a bunch of super famous people. You're obviously doing a lot right. When you go into a company, what is that before and after, and what is that process you take them through?
Well, first I would never say I'm doing a lot right. I would say I'm following a lot of principles, right? Because that fixed mindset is the paralyzing. Right. In each company, the principles are always the same. It shows up differently because what is for one company that's not customized to another will not work. But I think the mission is, the first is we have to compare compelling the future, right? What's the current reality? The hardest thing for humans to do, and this is what entrepreneurs have to do, is create a difference between the current reality and the future reality. And so the most powerful thing is, can we get completely honest with each other about where we are currently? And can we see it not better than it is, not worse than it is? And then second is, can we break from everything in the current? In my experience, is usually you have to go 3 to 5 years out, depending on the company, and say, okay, you're not stuck to any of the current. What's the ultimate vision you'd like to create? And then that's usually really exciting, compelling. And if you ask, can you do this? They'll say no. And so then the key is, okay, now how do we now build, what are those 3 to 5 key priorities that are the next steps that we're going to now build the bridge that no one can see from the current reality to the future reality? Now, getting to that current reality, the most important piece is, can we as humans connect more deeply? One of the challenges we have in building teams is, look at Instagram, look at social media. Everyone has their aspirational self that they present, and then they have who they believe they are. And we often feel unseen because I haven't communicated to you truly who I am, and therefore there's no way you can see me. And so if we're connecting with each other with these masks, then there's no true connection. And so communication is not actually communication. We're not actually connecting at the deepest level. So can we have the courage to be authentic and be vulnerable and get into a process we call journey to center, where we pull down those masks? And the moment we do that, of course, there's fear, but that's where you're truly seen. The SEALs, it was always absolutely okay if you had your responsibility covered. It was also absolutely okay if you didn't have your responsibility covered. If you're injured and you couldn't do something, or the thing that was not acceptable was if you said you had it and you didn't, because that's how people got injured. And those gaps in business are when someone says, yeah, I've got it. They actually don't have it. And then no one knows to cover that space. I mean, one of the keys of the SEAL teams is when you're doing close quartered battle or going into a house or a compound or a structure, if I enter the room and I go left, I can only go left. And now I'm going to cover this 45-degree responsibility this side, because I know my buddy's going to come in. He's going to go right. And the next person's going to go left, center, and then right. And so in the end, 316 to 45, they have an 8x mathematical advantage on the enemy. However, if I enter the room and I don't know if I trust that person, I try and take everything in. We call it the fatal funnel. There's no way you can possibly, no matter how much training, come into a room when you're set up. And I watch in business how many times sales doesn't trust operations, marketing doesn't trust, right? And so now I'm looking over at yours responsibility that I'm not good at because I don't trust that you can do that. And therefore I'm not even doing mine. Now, of course, we have a secondary piece. First, I clear my responsibility. Second, I then, once I'm good, I'll come back and clear, and it's all about covering everyone else's. But I have to do what's mine to do first. And so, if I'm not authentic, we have an unfounded base that no one can really get grounded to. So part of that current reality is, here's who we are, here's our actual strengths, here's our actual superpowers, here's our current weaknesses. I'm sure you deal with all kinds of entrepreneurs. In the end, the day you start a company, everything's wrong. And all you're trying to do is figure out what I'm going to fix first. And so then you can get away with any illusions of pretense or this is perfect or anything else, and allows you to get, okay, here's authentically where we are. Here's where we'd like to be. And now what are we going to do daily to fill those gaps?
Absolutely. A lot of entrepreneurs we talk to, we find that they have a fear of delegating to teams, or the business is their baby, which we completely understand, but it's very hard to let go. And as that brilliant metaphor you put forward is, they're trying to cover the whole room, but it's absolutely impossible, and actually makes the whole operation weaker.
The greatest curse of the entrepreneur is control, otherwise known as ego. And so there's a balance. You have to have the confidence and ability to say, this is so important, I'm going to do it. Every time we went into combat, I absolutely knew I didn't want the fate of the team resting on these little shoulders. And so we lived by dynamic subordination. The helicopter pilots were completely in charge until the moment we landed. The moment we landed, the recon team was the most qualified to get to target. So they were completely in charge until we got to within roughly 100 meters of the target. The breachers would come up front to get the door open, then the assaulters were in. And so each person had to do what was theirs to do the moment it was done. And everybody knew, hey, the helicopter pilots are not going to be great in the assault. Same thing, the breachers, they're configured for different things. So you have to have the complete interdependence. I have 5 kids, so they are dependent trying to get independent. And we often think that is the culmination, but independence, the highest is interdependence, where now we get to be more ourselves than we've ever been, and also covered by the rest of our team.
Absolutely. At Whale, we obviously work to help teams get familiar, document, and get familiar with their processes, because for us, process is how you do something, and the faster you know how to do it, and the less time you spend trying to figure out the way, the more you can concentrate on greater things at hand. What, if any, does the role of process play in bringing purpose to life?
We have a saying in the SEALs we call slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And so process we view as, okay, what are the operational standards? What are the tactics? What are the things that are going to be put into place? And in the end, they'll become unconsciously competent. It will become a program that we do every single time. But we have one of our, it's useful here, but it's, if you go and getting ready to do a SEAL operation, let's say rookies talk tactics, experts talk logistics, i.e., if we're trying to figure out how we're going to do compound assaults when we're getting ready to go in, we're in trouble. because we should have already had the innate standard operating procedures, processes in place that we all know what's going to happen. Even if we don't know what's going to happen, but we know when one person does this, the other person does this. So we already know what those processes are. So we're just talking logistics. We're talking, okay, we didn't know this is going to be 110 miles to target. And then we put the process in place for those. So the logistics are the thing that allows us to move fast, because the tactics, the most important piece, are already done. And so we're not trying to create, here's our standard operating procedures, here's what we're going to do when we're in the heat of the battle. Like, we're taking that and, of course, innovating every single night with after action reviews and that's another part of the process. We go to the target, we complete the mission, we instantly come back before anyone even takes their gear off, and we say, check your ego at the door, and now debrief everything that just happened, because the enemy's out there learning, so we have to be able to learn faster. So the processes are in place for continuous adaptation and innovation, not as something to be constrained by as we go forward.
Absolutely. That's a great. I'm loving these metaphors. They're so relevant. Is that something that is possible at the current pace of work?
Or is it not only possible, it's required.
Okay. So it's the fundamental key to surviving the change that's currently happening in the world of work. And that has happened, and that will continue to happen.
Absolutely. The awesome thing is we continue to get to build upon greater innovations and greater strengths from those before us. The challenge of that is that the next generation is even faster, bigger, better, right? So it's required. I mean, that was our experience in the SEALs when we started, when 2001 occurred. The military decision-making process took 96 hours or 4 days. And we realized, hey, we have a crisis. We have to move faster. So we started working 20-hour days, and we compressed that to 48 hours. So we cut that in half. We're operating twice as fast as ever in history. The challenge was the new enemy we were facing, the terrorist network. They could make decisions on what appeared to be about 8 hours.
Wow.
And so it was really hard working faster than ever before and being 6 times too slow. And so it was only when we swallowed our egos and gave up control that we now became interdependent, and we were able to explode from basically 18 raids in a month about every 48 hours to 300 raids in a month. And we went from working 20-hour days to 12, because the explosion in efficiency and effectiveness is only possible when we could build trust. And now each person was doing the thing that they were the best in the world at, and allowed everyone else to do what they were the best at. And so that shift is what was required and what allowed us to innovate in the SEALs. And I believe it's what's required in today's business world.
You know how to operate, you know where you need to get to, but you don't know how to get there yet. And that comes through that interdependence that you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I might have been able to be the perfect pencil sharpener guy if you took the old pencil sharpeners and I sharpened those, but it'd be so far below my skill set that it'd be a waste of potential, right? What I'm trying to do, I'll never be perfect at. It will always require everything I have, and there'll always be more needs to be done. And that's why it's worth, in my mind, dedicating my life to that growth, that pursuit of mastery in that domain, that I'll never have perfection. But because don't have perfection, I'll have continuous growth and excitement along the way.
What you are talking about, which you've mentioned as not having a perfection mindset, is continuous improvement. And that is essentially what we talk about when we talk about processes. We very often have that same kind of argument, like, oh, I wrote my processes 6 months ago or a year ago, why would I need to change them? But what you're talking about is, in order to get to that place where you really want to go, you need to be continuously improving.
So Carolyn Dweck talks about the growth mindset, and there's the fixed mindset, or that perfection mindset, or the growth mindset. Her across the hall from her at Stanford is my mentor's daughter, Allie Crum, and she's taking what my mentor Tom Crum has done and now providing the academic girding behind what he would call how do you get centered? How do I now constantly move from a center where I'm not in a fear place? I'm not fearful of the future. I'm not regretful of the past. How do I be fully present to this moment? Because now I've got everything present at this time. And so that discovery mindset, as Sensei would call it, discovery mindset is I'm continuously learning, adapting, growing. And it's really that which we're born with. And I have a 3-year-old right now. She is full discovery mindset. She has no fear. I have to protect her from killing herself every day. No fear of anything. She's curious. She's exploring. It's only later we get rigid and think, well, what if someone judges it? What if I'm not perfect? And so, that the beginner's mindset, the discovery mindset is the piece that gives us all the courage to keep trying and innovating, because every time we're not worried about who did it right or wrong. We're worried about what do we learn. Because if we can continuously learn and get more reps at learning, that's the organization that's going to be the fastest. And that's the organization that's going to grow. It's the organization that's going to be able to accomplish its mission.
So I'm interested in your vision of where you want to take things and how this applies in your world.
I wouldn't eat it wouldn't tell you to eat it if I wasn't eating my own cooking. And so, I'm on a mission. I have seen a lot of physical death in war, and people fear that as the worst of things. And I actually believe the worst of things is spiritual death. When you see people lose that spark of light and hope in their lives. And so to me, that's the greatest threat to the world and society now, is losing that hope, which is what drives the innovation engine, which allows for purpose, which allows us to do what's required as we continue to adapt and evolve. And so, this conversation is exhilarating. I've found smaller and smaller percentage of the population that are having these direct, deep, vulnerable conversations. And so I've pivoted to say, okay, I need to tell better stories, because stories are the place that allows us. I've learned a long time ago, nonfiction, I get to tell truth about events. Fiction, I get to tell truth about the humans. And so pivoting into stories of a dear friend, Hunter Arnold, and I guess 13 years ago now, started building, how do we now build a process for telling stories at scale? And so we pivoted into Broadway of Hadestown. I could tell ancient Greek mythology set in New Orleans, or Moulin Rouge, truth, beauty, freedom, love. How do you bring stories? We're now in a world of 220 character tweets in 2.5 hours. People can be immersed in a story with 1,100 of their closest friends in a coherent field that can allow them to experience. I believe the mind, once stretched by imagination, never resumes its original dimension. So how do we tell the most powerful, immersive stories? Just like visualization was always crucial for me, how can we create that visualization on stage? How do we create that visualization in reality? And so for me, my whole mission is, how do you do life transformation for humans? And sometimes it's the people that are seeking, that want that direct guiding, coaching perspective that you're also passionate about providing. And the other is, how do we tell stories that when somebody goes, maybe that applies in my life? When I was at the Naval Academy, Shakespeare was my favorite class. I was a chemistry major. I just had to take one liberal arts ed class. And when I got to the end of Shakespeare's cathartic plays, I was like, oh, wow, maybe that applies in my life. And so it's super exciting. Just like you're talking about, how do I guide and coach people? How do I tell stories that a man or women convinced against their will is of the same opinion still? But if I can tell you a story and you decide that's true for me, then it's a complete unlock. And so we're trying to say, can we shift the consciousness of 1 billion people? Can we tell stories to 1 billion people? Because as a technologist, that's that first part of the curve, to be able to begin to adapt and evolve all culture. As my mentor talked about, and I think he got it from Buckminster Fuller, if we could all shift from passengers on planet Earth to crew members, everything changes.
True that. My last question to wrap up. I've watched your interview. I'm a CEO and founder of a scaling company. You've kind of piqued my interest. What's my next step? But I don't want fluffy.
Next steps to reach out to someone that has experience in the domain that you seek to master. So in my life, I continuously seek out mentors. I continue to seek out the person that's, I like to try and find people that are scary for me to talk to, right? And so that's what we learned in the SEALs. You really learned how to learn. There's an assumption, if I'm new at something, if I'm new at free fall or jumping out of a plane, I'm going to work with somebody that's got a few jumps. But the reality is, if you want to learn the fastest, we would work with the best in the world, because the gradient between they and us was so great that it allowed us to learn the fastest. And that's how we could work with the best jumpers in the world. And then we'd work next week with the best divers in the world, the next week with the next skill set. And the key was, I had to be able to, as a CEO, surrender to learn, because if I can't learn from them,
You
I'm
can't
going to
grow
die.
to
I'm
them.
not going to get there. I have to fill that gradient between they and I. And then the moment they're gone, now I have to lead, right? When I may feel unqualified to lead at the skill set I just learned. But for me, that's the key process is what do I see as the biggest hole in my company? Whenever we got in the SEAL operation, we said, well, why can't we get this mission completed? We say, well, who isn't here? And then we go, who's that person that's missing that we're missing? Go find the best in the world, bring them onto the team. And then that the ops, limited problem will shift to somewhere else in the company. If you now all of a sudden, if sales is great, you're going to need to increase your marketing, or if the product's great and you can't sell it, you need a marketing team. Then if the marketers are great, then you can't close, you need sales. So, the choke point for the company will continue to move, but the moment it's seen as a moving constraint instead of a permanent constraint, then everything changes. Because like, okay, what do we do to expand that part of the business?
Right now. So to be growing, we need to be learning.
Yes, ma'am.
I love it. Thank you, Curt. It has been fascinating chatting to you today. We're really